Hold on, I need to close the door. Hang on. I've opened the door because despite it being raining, it's actually pretty hot. It's been so hot in my office. It's like 35 degrees C the other day.
Really?
That rain was actually impaired.
Jeez.
It's just like so hot.
35 degrees, that's like oven temperatures.
It's pretty hot, yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's down, it's only 24, so, but still, it's a bit stuffy.
Yeah, we're at 24.4 at the minute.
Oh, mine's 24.9.
What episode are we on anyway?
I don't know. It doesn't matter, does it?
No.
We do what we do. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Slack Chat. This is a podcast where myself, Stuart Winter, the architect of the ARM port, and Phil, who's the maintainer of the SRP distribution, which is an extension to the ARM port to enable Slackware ARM onto Raspberry Pis. Hello, Phil.
Hello from me.
This podcast is really about what we've been working on the Slackware project, and in particular on the ARM port, and just sort of shooting the breeze really about what we're doing and what's been going on. So we haven't done a podcast for a little while, actually, Phil, have we?
We haven't, no. Last one we did was with Brent.
Yeah, It's been a while now. There's been so many things going on. But what have you been up to recently?
Very recently, I've been working on Vulkan V3D drivers for Slackware ARM on the Raspberry Pi 4.
Right.
And for anybody who isn't familiar with what that is, it's a 3D graphics and computing API in place of OpenGL. Yeah, I've just been messing around with that lately, and just doing the updates did a new build for a released kernel for the SRP project for the installer, and not much else, to be honest.
What's been going on with the Vulkan then? What's the Vulkan package about?
Right. The problem with, and you'll know this one too well yourself, Stuart, the problem with the video drivers on the Raspberry Pi is that you don't support them. And it's Video Core 4 on the Raspberry Pi 3 and Video Core 6 on the Raspberry Pi 4. Now, They work. Obviously they work, but as for the 3D element, the 3D graphics rendering and generation, that doesn't happen. The Free Desktop project, they've got a team working on some Vulkan drivers for the Raspberry Pi 4. Now they managed to get that up and running after a fashion under Raspbian. It's Raspberry Pi OS now. Is it the Raspberry OS or whatever they've called it this week? We know what we're talking about. They managed to get the Vulkan 3D stuff working on that. And I was looking at it the other day. I installed Raspbian on a test SD card, and I just went for it. I just installed it all, and it worked pretty well. And I was quite impressed. But that was just proof of concept. I only used it for like 10 minutes or something.
Okay.
And I thought, right, now I've seen it working on Raspbian, I can do this on Slackware ARM. It's achievable, and the actual, you've got to recompile MESA, but include the V3D and the VC4. You've got to recompile it with, give me a minute and I'll look it up. Right, okay, so you will not have in your configuration the Broadcom drivers for the V3D, and that's basically what I've got to build into MESA in order to get this to work. And
okay, but what are you changing in the build script? Because looking at the build script, it's got a variable called Gallium drivers, which includes VC4 and V3D.
I've got a Vulkan driver, which is the Broadcom Vulkan driver. There's no DRI drivers, and the Gallium drivers, Gallium. The Gallium drivers I'm actually building is V3D, KMSRO, and VC4.
Yeah, so those are in the build script already.
Yeah.
Apart from Vulkan, that's the only one that isn't.
Yeah. So what the Free Desktop people are doing is they're actually building an open source Vulkan V3D driver, and it's in the development stages at the minute. I mean, it's nowhere near complete, and a lot of it doesn't work. Graphics functions that they're just not going to work until they've written the code for it. But a lot of it does, like shadow mapping and the PBR image stuff. That's just mind blowing seeing it on a Raspberry Pi. And I'd like to see it working on Slackware ARM, because for me, getting it working on Slackware ARM takes a lot more effort than just installing a few packages and clicking a few buttons. So, after working on it, I've been on it for about 2 days now. In fact, it's 3 days, and I counted up the amount of time I spent on this. It's nearly 17 hours.
Right.
I've spent nearly 17 hours just writing the scripts to build it, so that next time I do it, I won't have to go through all this work. Yeah, and just getting it working on Slackware ARM. It's an education. It's something that I've never looked into before. Not just the graphics. I mean, the entire desktop. I spent more time on the X desktop in the past 3 days than I have in the past 20 years. And it's been an education. It's been great fun. But just to see it working, I mean, that's something. That's really something.
So is the only thing you actually need to add is you need to change Mesa or Mesa, whatever you might pronounce it.
Mesa. You need to rebuild Mesa with the Broadcom stuff in it. You also need. I cheated on this one. The package is called ASIMP, ASSIMP. I don't know how you pronounce that.
Probably like that, I guess. ASIMP.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It facilitates the 3D reading and writing of data.
Is that one of the modules for X?
Yes.
For X. So it's not just a case of adding another driver into Mesa. You need to add one in. You need to actually build a separate package for another driver as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
You need the ASIMP stuff in there for it to work. But everything else, every other package, and there are quite a few, is included in Slackware ARM. And basically, I had a few missing. Like we spoke about it the other day, the libdrm package, because I was saying, oh God, I can't believe I've written this script for libdrm when I found an Alien Bob script on the internet, and you said, what do you mean this package in Slackware ARM? And I'm like, oh my God, it already exists. So it's funny how I make this list of packages that I need. And what I do is I search through Slackware source tree to see if it already exists. And if it doesn't, I'll look to build it. For whatever reason, I just hadn't done that. But then I realized that I would have had to have done that anyway, because it's completely different from compiling what Alien Bob was doing in his script. Because I think his was x86 based. Obviously this is ARM, so it's a lot different. But yeah, there are quite a few packages required that obviously all get installed on a full install of Slackware, except for ASIMP, and also the Python 3 Mako. That's also required, but you can install that with like pip3 install Mako. You just install that in the source directory.
So what do you? So the libdrm package that's in the X series of Slackware in ARM has some differences for ARM specifically, which it just enables the Tegra and the Exynos and some OMAP stuff. Well, basically enables some particular ARM system on chip drivers. So do you need to change? I mean, have a look at what's in there. If it's just a case of enabling some other driver, I don't really see the problem with that, because I'm already doing it anyway to support the systems that I've got. And the same with Mesa, as long as adding Vulkan to it doesn't break it, it's fine by me. That's what I do anyway.
Just bear with me.
The only real concern is whether I don't like the idea of adding extra packages that I don't really. If they're leaf node packages, such as one of the Xorg drivers to enable ARMSOC or one of the other say FB Turbo or anything else that I'm adding in, that's fine because nothing else really uses them. So it doesn't really matter if they go away in the future or something like that, because they stop compiling, or if anything else links against them. It doesn't really happen, so it's not really a problem. But it's only if you start adding extra packages in that then suddenly other parts of the system start linking against, then the problem is that it takes me, it basically diverges from how Slackware x86 is, because other packages might start finding it and start using that functionality which doesn't exist on x86. So I could run into build problems and operational problems that don't exist anywhere else.
Yeah.
So that's really why it's quite you have to take new packages with a bit of caution and think it through. But certainly just enabling a few extra options or extra drivers, if it builds, it's fine. I'll just change the script.
Well, I think if it goes the way that it looks like it will go, you'll be including them anyway, because the Vulkan 3D stuff is they're looking to get that included in the mainstream kernel, so it'll all float down from upstream eventually. That's the plan anyway. Whether, as well as I do, you've said this a million times to me before, whether it gets included or not is another thing. You can wait for years and years for something to be supported, and it may never happen. So I'm just looking at the Slackware current source. The Mesa build script, and this is where I got half of my dependencies from, because when I needed to know which packages were required for Mesa, it was like a godsend, because in the actual build script itself, there's the Slack check package dependencies, which tells you which packages are required. So yeah, it's really good. Mako is one of them, actually.
Right. Yeah. Most of those are build runtime dependencies, but yeah, there's a few build time in there that I've put in there as well.
Now, let's have a look at your Slack build. Yeah. Okay. The Gallium drivers. You cover a lot of ARM devices with those. Well, obviously you've got to. I'm only dealing with the VC4, the V3D, and the KM-SRO, and nothing else. Nothing else. That's the only thing I'm rebuilding. Oh, the other thing that I found out, which this was a showstopper. Until I was reading a Gentoo forum about the Video Core 6 V3D, and this guy, completely unrelated to anything I was doing, this guy said, if you try running a Vulkan asset and it comes up with device cannot be initialized, check to make sure that FB Turbo isn't enabled, because if it is, it's a showstopper. And I thought, that can't be it. That really can't be it. So I disabled FB Turbo, and hey presto, everything came to life. I found it on Google while I was searching for something else. And I don't know why I was attracted to it, but it was the answer to the problem.
I'm not sure what you mean by disable FB Turbo, because FB Turbo is a driver for frame buffer.
Yeah. So if FB Turbo is active, then Vulkan will not work. It will not work whatsoever. Okay. Because it needs to, oh God, what's it called? The LLVM driver. It needs to use that, and an FB Turbo running is not a good thing. And I can't remember why he said that that it needs to be the LLVM, but it does. That's what it needs to be.
Okay. It doesn't really make sense to me. I don't know enough about the X11 system and the way the graphics drivers interact to really comment on that.
LLVM pipe. Okay. That's what it's using, and basically says if FB Turbo exists in xorg.conf.d99fturbo.conf, fbturbo.conf, remove it from that file. But what I did, I skipped all that and just renamed the xorg conf and just ran with the defaults. That was something I was going to ask you about, because I spoke to a certain person who said, if you're running with the defaults and it's working, just leave it at that. Don't try and optimize xorg.conf any further, because running with the defaults is the best idea. And I thought, well, okay, then I'll just try that. And I've been working with it sort of all morning and most of the afternoon just from the defaults, and it's unbelievable. It really is.
Oh, that's good. Well, if you need any changes to the Mesa or the libdrm build scripts, let me know. Probably should be fine.
I might consider, if it were me, I might consider including the async package, because if the video driver world does move to the Vulkan 3D, then this package is going to be needed in order to run that. So maybe you can wait and see if it happens, and you can wait forever, or it might happen before you know it, and it might surprise you. Who knows? Depends. I think the full release of the Vulkan software is a long way off yet. I mean, they've been working on it now for 2 years, and it's nowhere near complete. So
okay,
I'm not holding my breath for it to get done before Christmas. But the ASIMP is I've read into it a bit, and it's quite a nifty little package.
Okay.
But only for 3D. If you're not working with 3D, ASIMP is a waste of time.
Okay.
Because that's all it does is moves assets and data around and facilitates the rendering.
So the best thing to do is if I can change, because you don't want to be shipping replacement Mesa or libdrm packages, because that's just going to break stuff for users, isn't it? Unless they blacklist it, but then they'll end up with something that's old.
Yeah.
And you'll have to keep it with what I'm doing. Whereas if I can just put in some extra drivers to the build scripts of both of those two, that makes it a lot easier, and you can keep your ASIM package for yourself for a while and distribute that separately, particularly because I'm not uploading at the cadence that I used to do. So by the time I upload something, you could just recompile it and push it out for the latest current, and it'd be good for about a month or maybe a few weeks or something like that at least.
Really fun though. It's fun to get involved in this, and I've got to admit, I've had more fun with this than I've had in a long, long time, because it's brand new, totally unknown, and like with a lot of things with Slackware, it's possible, but how much work is it going to take? How much time and effort is it going to take? You know, I've heard my friends say, "Oh no, you should do it with Debian." You know, all you do is install 2 packages and type out a command, and it's working. With Slackware, it takes a lot longer. And I had one friend this morning say, "You know, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. I'm trying to run something and a package is missing and it breaks, and I just can't be bothered." You know, with Debian, it just works. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, he's right, but that's not where the fun's at for me. You know, it's not where I learn. I don't learn anything by typing apt-get install blah blah blah. I don't learn anything. I wouldn't have learned everything I've learned about Vulkan if I'd just had to and to be honest, when I did it on the Raspberry Pi, that's exactly what it was. I installed packages from a list of packages that somebody gave me. So I just cut and pasted. Didn't know what half of them were. I do now, because I've had to look it up for Slackware reasons.
Yeah.
I've built 2 build scripts, both in the style of Slack builds. One was for Mesa and the other was for ASIMP. And I've learned about Python assets and why they're needed. It's been a whole education about stuff, and the ins and outs of which packages are required for Mesa. You know, it's fantastic experience, and you know, ask me in a month's time and I've probably forgotten most of it, but it hasn't half been a great deal of fun, you know.
You might, you'll forget the details, I'm sure, eventually, but the the way you go about finding this stuff out, you learn a lot more over that you may have initially realize about how things start to plug together. And you're saying until you really start going into this stuff, you never really get an understanding of what's involved and how long it takes to do this stuff. If you want to bounce me over any changes to the two build scripts, let me know, and then I can certainly have a look at what the binary out, or rather, look at what the package is that you produce for ASIM. Because if, for example, it includes any Python bindings or anything, that actually then complicates, well, it doesn't really complicate, but it adds to the tracking of a Python upgrade. So, for example, when Python is upgraded to the latest version, you may need to rebuild all of the other packages that also have Python bindings for that release, particularly if it's a major version bump, which means that I would have to add to a tracking list for that particular package, where at the moment I don't have one because that's all handled by Patrick. So I can see whenever anything is updated for Python, I just use the build list and consume it. I haven't got my own thing. Whereas for X, when X is updated, I've got a separate part of the build system that picks up and rebuilds any of the packages that are added for ARM. So they never get out of lockstep with the original, or rather with the Xorg server. So it actually does. If you give this work to me, it means I've got work to do, and I don't have a Raspberry Pi. So I don't have too much interest in it.
Yeah, it's not like I say, Stuart. It's not gonna happen soon, because these drivers are still in development, and there's a big bold notice on the website saying some of this doesn't work, and we know it doesn't work. It's still in the development stages.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm in the process of uploading. I did a load of screenshots. I'm uploading them to IMGUR, and I was just in the process of doing that when you contacted me. So yeah, there is going to be some visual concept to it as well. Although I would really love to make a video. And you forgive me for asking this, but you're talking to an ex-desktop noob. How would I go about making a video of the desktop so I could show all the 3D effects and everything, and then put it on YouTube?
I don't know, because I use a Mac. A Mac has a built-in tool, although I've never actually used it. But that said, there is a package called SSR that was just added to Slackware, and I think
SSR.
It was. Oh yeah, it's not turned up in ARM yet because I haven't pushed the updates out. But I think that's what. Hold on.
SSR. Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. It is a simple screen recorder. Yeah, it's called SSR. It's simple screen recorder. I've never used it. The only thing I know is that I had to change the build options to make it build for ARM, and I've done that by disabling support for GL, because there's no support for that for ARM, unfortunately. So I don't know how effective it's going to be, but once I push out these updates, I have actually included a link to some of the issues on GitHub that explain how to make it build for ARM and why. There's no OpenGL support.
Thanks for that. I'm going to have a look into that, because it would be really interesting. It's one thing looking at screenshots, but you've really got to see this stuff working.
Mm-hmm.
Like the shadow detailing and the texturing and the wind effect. There's it's like a tablecloth that has a wind effect on it that moves with the wind. It's
okay.
You might be accusing me of getting off on cheap thrills, but it's something I've never seen on Slackware ARM, and it's brand new and it looks fantastic. I mean, some of it is.
What you're saying reminds me of the demo days of the Atari and the Amiga, when you'd have the pirates, and they'd have they go out of their way to make some sort of rotating text or make things And it reminds me of and the pirate's crack screen was actually better than the game.
Yeah. Well, this not unlike what you're referring to, because I forget what procedure they used to use for that on the Amigas. I'm going to kick myself because I was really into that kind of thing, because this is totally off topic, but they used Amigas in the first series of Babylon 5, the sci-fi series. They used Amigas to generate the CGI and that was done through toasters, what they call toasters. And a lot of that rendering, I got interested in that because of Babylon 5, because it's one of my favorite shows.
Okay.
So yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and not unlike that, some of the rendering is very similar. Obviously, it's not done in any way similar, but it does look very similar with a ball bearing with a reflection on it.
Oh, okay. I know what you
You know,
mean. Right, right.
if you look at a pixel generated picture, it looks pretty horrible compared to what this looks like with all the 3D effects on it.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and the actual one on the demo, you've got it's like a ball bearing in the middle of a hotel forecourt, and the forecourt is horseshoe shaped, so you can spin around and 360 degrees, and
Mhm.
the reflection in the ball bearing obviously changes as you move around. It really is an awesome effect. I mean, here I am babbling about it. I can't actually I can't show you what
No, I'm
it's
just
like yet.
imagining it because I remember seeing something on an Amiga magazine ages ago where you've got these. What would you? I've forgotten the name of it, but basically, you'd have essentially a grid, and it would show you the yeah, a reflection of a ball or something like that. And I can only just imagine it's something like that from what you've described. So these are
Yeah.
interactive demos, are they? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's done by a fellow called Sasha Willems, and it's linked into the developers who are working on the Vulkan, and I'm not entirely sure how, but all these guys are working on it together.
Okay.
So yeah, these it's Sasha Willems, github.com, Sasha Willems, SASCHAWILLEMS, and he's got a repo there called Vulkan, and you can download all the samples and the assets and whatever else you need.
Hmm.
Um, it's really cool. It really is cool. Bearing in mind that this is predominantly designed for Raspbian, so all the work that they're doing
Hmm.
is based on that system and the packages available. And I've read through some of the guides, and it's just a simple case of, right, so you need this package, install it, apt-get install, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at the Slackware packages, and with the async, I'm like, well, I've got to build that. And I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to download the Slack build stuff and get it all together. Um, yeah, this is great fun. This is what I love to do, and this is why I love Slackware. It forces you to do, if you want to get things done, it forces you to do things that other operating systems don't, and in the process, it's a hell of a learning curve. It really is.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's like anything. What you're really saying is you learn a lot out of necessity.
Yeah,
And in the case of if some people can't, as you say, can't be bothered to go and do it, they'll use something else where they don't have to do it. It's quite normal.
yeah, yeah.
I do the same. I don't. I'm operating
Well,
system agnostic. I've got
a
all
lot of
sorts of
these,
stuff.
sorry, lot of these people who they don't even say that. They get as far as it doesn't exist. I'm not going to bother, or it's not possible. I'm not going to bother. I mean, I wanted to share this with you because I know you have a passion for all things ARM, just like I do. And to see it working under Slackware it's a big thrill for me. It really is a big thrill. But I'm not gonna release the build scripts or do much about it yet. I'm gonna
Okay.
wait and see what the development is on the
Hmm.
developers side of things, because obviously if it's not going to go much further, then there's no point in investing any time in
Right.
it. But
No.
I know Nvidia. There was a guy working for Nvidia. I forget his name, but he was one of the software developers on the drivers for Nvidia, and he left Nvidia to go work. Was it with the Kronos Group?
Oh, okay.
Kronos Group, who owned the Vulkan thing. I think he went to work for them, and has since been assigned to the Vulkan driver for the Raspberry Pi. It's not a flash in the pan thing.
Mm.
People are investing some serious time and effort into this. And of course, I don't know how much or how quickly because I've only just got into it over the past few days or so. But yeah, it's good. It really is good. And I can see a lot of potential for this. Being a games player, I don't know if you're much of a games player yourself, computer games, I mean. From a games playing perspective, it just opens so many doors, and
Okay.
you can see, well, one can see applications for other things like 3D design and stuff like that. It's just a new, well, not a new, but
Okay.
it's a newfound way of doing things on a Raspberry Pi. And especially under Slackware. I mean, Slackware ARM is so sexy, anything you do on it is brilliant. Well, it
Okay.
is, isn't it? I mean, I don't know, Slackware ARM it has something special. It has
Does it?
that,
It's
it's got
ARM.
that
That's what it has.
boom.
Okay.
And when somebody talks Slackware x86 to me, I'm like, okay, don't really know what you're talking about. And it's silly because when people talk Slackware ARM, I'm like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's because of the structure of the booting system. There's a lot that I don't know about Slackware x86. But with ARM, some people will say it's more complicated. I think it's a hell of a lot easier. I really do think the way that the boot sequence is structured, especially on the Raspberry Pi. I know it's different on the Orange Pi and the devices that use U-boot, which is a hell of a lot more configurable.
Yeah.
But on the Raspberry Pi, as long as you've got the right files in place, it's going to boot. As long as you haven't made a mess of the kernel, it's going to boot.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think it's just because you have looked into the boot system that you're using for the Raspberry Pi. I think that I would say that the thing is there's a fundamental difference between how you boot on x86, for example, using Lilo or Grub, versus also how you would boot on a hang on, what is it? UEFI.
UEFI, yeah.
Yeah, how you boot that. And I've only had a very limited experience of that years ago, but from what I remember, the UEFI console was essentially part of the firmware of the machine itself.
Hmm.
And that's very similar, although it isn't the same as, well, kind of essentially is. That's very similar to how U-boot works, where you've got the U-boot console, which is very configurable and it's programmable to some extent with scripting, and which is how actually the U-boot works on Slackware ARM and anything else. You've got that, and that is then you build the binary, and you put the binary on either an SD card or some kind of removable storage, or you put it on the NAND device of the system itself. You sort of burn it, if you like, to the onboard NAND instead.
Right.
And so then it boots off of that. And if it can't find that, then it boots off of the SD card or the other way around, depending on the config and stuff. So that's that. But the x86 is pretty straightforward if you use Lilo or Grub, because you've got the only difference I would say really is that the console, Lilo doesn't really have one, but you could say it kind of does in a way, because you can specify the parameters at boot time. However, the difference though is that console is loaded off of the hard disk or the storage or whatever it is on the system, whereas the U-boot is kind of, you usually put it on the
Yeah.
NAND, you boot it off of there,
Yeah.
which is kind of ends up being similar in my opinion to how it would be on UEFI. But the difference is with the boot. To be honest, having tried to build or having maintained the U-boot stuff on ARM for a long, long time, it's not still in a place where I would like it to be. I would like it to be that you don't have to copy and paste loads of lines and copy and paste it in, and because that's kind of a bit of a recipe for people making mistakes.
Yeah.
And it can be a little bit more complicated than that as well, which I don't really want to get into on the podcast, but it could be a little bit more complicated than that. And secondly, unless you really want to understand and and kind of look into look into U-boot a little bit more, it means that if you want to diversify from what I've put in the instructions, then you are going to have to do a little bit of work. Whereas I would prefer it if in the installer I could detect, I could let you set what you've got and then take those settings and convert them into something, some U-boot style-y. And then U-boot would just take care of itself like it does if you use Grub or Lilo, where you've got control over the boot parameters from within the operating system itself. But that actually is a lot more difficult than it sounds. And I have looked into this. I looked at how Debian do it, and the problem is that even if you build it and you succeed in getting it working for the orange pile, whatever, the thing is that it's going to be different on other devices, and I'm just not interested in, or I don't have the time to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because it's just another maintenance burden. And likewise, when U-boot changes, when inevitably I need to upgrade U-boot, then I'm going to have to go and test everything I've documented and may find that it doesn't work and then spend even more time. Whereas it's easier just say, look, here's some instructions, follow it, have a nice day. And if you want to take it further, go and figure it out by reading the documents. So I wouldn't say that it's so much better. It kind of depends on what you really want and what where you are in the chain in the sort of software lifecycle chain, and what you need to manage as a distributor.
I did get involved with U-boot when I did I did an image for the Hummingbird, the solid run Hummingbird.
Oh yeah.
And I got into U-boot. Yeah, that was 2016 or 2016 I think it was. That was a very interesting device with a lot of functionality, but it just didn't take off. And I think in 3.5 years we had 1,400 visitors to the website, which that's pretty much no interest in terms of visitor numbers. I mean, we get more than 1,400 hits a day on the SAPI website now. Probably most of them are bots, but it's quite busy on there.
Yeah, again, it depends though, right? I mean, depends what you're doing it for, isn't it? I mean, we've talked before, if you're doing it for other people, then you're going to be concerned with number of hits. Whereas if you do, my approach is I do it because I wanted that particular hardware because I found it useful at the time, so I'll support it. It doesn't really affect me if anyone else uses it or they don't, really, because I use it if I want to and make it available, which some people find very strange that it's not done for them. But that's just the way it is, isn't it? At the moment, I'm still just busy hacking on Firefox and seeing how I can make that thing build.
That's something I wanted to ask you. Now then, without and believe me when I say this happened, because it did. Now, I decided I just renamed the xorg.conf file. I renamed it xorg.back. And then I started X, and I got into XFCE. And at the top of the X desktop, right next to where the wireless icon usually sits on XFCE, I've got a HP device manager. How's that get there?
It must be just part of the default installation, where if it's there, it just loads it, I suppose. I don't know.
Is that must be part of the Slackware ARM software that's activated, because I don't know where it's come from, and I'm thinking, where
it's
the hell
standard
is
in
this?
Slackware. It's in x86 as well. I don't change any of that stuff. I don't change it at all. It's all
okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of that, the build scripts in there. I hardly, even though the Slackware ARM build system is completely separate and maintained completely separately from Patrick's build system or build scripts, and the structure of them is slightly different, all sorts of things. The way that the packages actually are constructed, the options and things like that, are pretty much always in line with what's going on the x86. The only times when they're not, and that's the reason why I've got a different build system, because I can just do what I need to do with it, is where, like in the case of that we've been talking about on this episode, is and a few other packages as well, is like mess of libdrm, when I've got some ARM modifications I need to make to get this thing to build, to make it useful and to make it support what I'm actually using. So and in some cases that means adding things for ARM, and in some cases it means removing things that are in the x86 build that don't work on ARM or don't exist or are written in x86 assembler and it's not been ported to ARM, and those kinds of things. It's like a handful of packages, if off the top of my head, that are like that. So pretty much everything in the ARM is a complete port of Slackware. It's not a fork. So I try to avoid changing anything that would turn it into a fork as much as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that in fact that HP thing you're talking to, I can see it now on my Slackware x86-64 desktop. I can see the icon, and I don't use anything HP anywhere, and I just haven't got rid of it because it doesn't really bother me.
It didn't appear until I renamed the xorg conf file, you see, because that's what threw me. I thought, where's this come from? And I've installed I've installed more things than I care to mention in the past sort of 3 or 4 days, and I just wondered if it was something that I'd put on there unintentionally.
I can't see any reason whatsoever that would make a difference, because there's nothing in the xorg conf that has anything to do with starting applications. So it's just literally about which driver do you want to use to address your graphics card and some other little options around it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you start X without I have not configured X for years. I think we talked about this on the podcast before, when you have to put in in the old days, you had to manually configure everything. And I just didn't know what I was doing. But these days, the only reason that I even ship it with FB Turbo as the default is because that happens to work on every device that I happen to support. So it's like, it's not the best, most optimized thing, but it does actually give you a desktop. And if you don't use FB Turbo, if I remember rightly, I don't think X works at all on the Orange Pi. I'd have to double check. It might do now, but it didn't do before. I think it just went, I can't find a screen, help me out. Here's some help. Here's FB Turbo. I think that's what it is, but I can't see any reason why, unless the only thing, if I remember rightly, is the X init scripts that start the actual window manager itself. But again, I don't see what that's got to do with xorg.conf either. Don't know.
Strange. Quickie question then. If FB Turbo is just like a generic failsafe for the devices that you do support, I obviously I've been told just to run with the defaults. Would that be your advice as well?
What defaults?
The defaults without configuring xorg.conf, without having any xorg.conf file. So whatever defaults the system runs with, that's the ones that you start X with.
Yeah, because you don't need an xorg.conf file really. X is capable generally of figuring out what the hardware is and then picking the appropriate driver, whereas in the past it couldn't. I don't know why it doesn't do that on the ARM, on the Orange Pi. I haven't ever really looked into it. I just know I can configure it. The only other thing I tend to do in Xorg is set.
Actually, look to see what driver it's using. If it'll.
No, that's it. Yeah. So the answer is, if it works without a config file, bear in mind the only thing the config file is doing is setting FB Turbo as the driver. Then just use it without the config file, because you don't need it if it works without it. In fact, that's better, because it means in your documentation for such a device, you can just say, go and do rm-rf this config file, and just make sure whenever you upgrade the where is the xorg.conf come from? Is it the I forgot the X11 scale package?
X11 xorg.conf something or other. Etc. Sorry, etc. X11 blah blah blah. I'm using the Vulkan V3D 4.2 driver at the minute.
Oh, hold on a second. So wait a minute. It's not the xorg.conf file is actually part of the X11-scale package. So there's the skeleton package. So it includes like the bare bones of X, and then the other packages populate all the drivers and stuff around it, like the server, the drivers, and all that business. So actually, I'm saying that because you could quite easily tell a user to delete that xorg.conf file, because I can tell you that that package hardly ever changes because it's architectural, pretty much architecture neutral. And unless I go and change that config file, that package is hardly ever going to change. So the users won't need to keep deleting the xorg.conf file, because what's going to happen is when inevitably I do push a new version of that, if they haven't got an xorg.conf file, what's going to happen is that the post installation script for the X11 scale package will detect that there isn't a xorg.conf file there, and it will populate. It will create a new one with FB Turbo in it. Right. And so then that will cause them some confusion when it stops working. Actually, what might be interesting to prevent that though is that the post installation script, by default the package ships with the conf as a .new file. So when you install it, if you've got an existing config, it won't overwrite it. It will just leave the new one in the package as .new. That's the file name on the file system. But I wonder what happens if you have essentially just a placeholder X11 file with just a couple of comments in it.
Yeah.
Does it break? Does it figure out?
I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking because
test it.
What I'm thinking about a discussion that went on LQ recently about FB Turbo.
Right.
And it messed somebody's mouse cursor up. Now, as much as I understand FB Turbo, which is not very much, it's for accelerating Windows, and I don't think that includes the mouse cursor, so I can understand why the fellow had problems with it. But in order to get the Vulkan 3D stuff working, I have to get rid of FB Turbo.
I don't think so. It's a video driver. So according to the package description, it's optimized for the all-winner socks, which is the ones that I generally support, and it says it uses some of or can provide or facilitate access to the 2D and 3D hardware acceleration features on it. So and it acts as a drop-in replacement for the standard FB Dev driver. So I don't know enough about it, but I'm pretty certain that it has nothing to do with mouse.
I only picked this tip up off the Gentoo forum.
Okay.
Where the guy said, if FB Turbo is enabled, you need to get rid of it. And once I'd done that, everything worked. Up until then, I've been scratching my head thinking, why won't the device because it said the Vulkan device could not initialize. And I thought, well, I can't be missing something. It must be something else that's stopping it from working.
Okay. Well, what you should do is go and look at the var log. Where is it? Xorg? Hold on. Yeah, what you're best to do is have a look at the var log xorg.0.log, and that will tell you what the thing is doing. So, for example, if I type start X now from a remote console, it's telling me, it'll put this in the log, but it's also telling me it can't find any screens because I'm not running it at the console, so it's not able to detect it. But if you run that from the console, then look at the log and see what it's doing, and that might tell you which driver it's picked anyway and give you a little bit more information about it.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Also, I don't know if this still works, but you used to be able to do capital X dash configure, X space dash configure as a command line operator, and then that would run through the configuration process for you. So it would do the auto detection, then it would create you a new xorg.conf file that you could then customize and put into your directory. But again, I haven't done that for years either because it's just unnecessary these days.
I'm very green with the X desktop, and I'm still feeling my way into it. All this is new information and new territory for me, but it's really interesting because, like I say, being a games player, I'd love to play Minecraft with all the 3D rendering going on. Not that that's possible yet, but it's something to look forward to for the future. Great fun, really great fun.
If you want to build this Vulkan package, I think that's probably the best thing to do, what we've talked about. And so you need to make some modifications. You would just
on top of building the Mesa package, there's also some settings that are required. And one of them is
settings for what? For the Vulkan package?
Yeah, for the Vulkan. One of them is a global environment variable to tell the Vulkan where to find the 3D library, basically.
Hmm.
It needs to be a system-wide variable. I'm wondering where I should specify this setting, whether to use etc. environment or like profile or even user profile.
Right. Okay. The easiest thing is if you don't want to change the etc. environment because that is just a default placeholder really, and it would complicate the removal of the package of your package as well because you'd have to create a post removal script for the package, which package tools does actually support now, as of a few months ago. I think it does
Mhm.
support post removal scripts, but then you need to write some script and test it, and it complicates it. The easiest thing to do is if you look in /etc/profile.d, and then you'll find there's a whole pile of scripts in there for ice cream, glibc, core utils, loads of other stuff. So you can pop a script in there. I would suggest making it a .new type of arrangement where
Okay.
you know what I'm talking about, right? So
Yeah.
so you've got some. You can just take the script from say the bash package and just copy the doinst config. Sorry,
Hmm.
copy the doinst script from there and just and then so that's the easiest way of doing it, because then when you remove the package, the removal will take care of it. So you don't need to do any setting or anything like that to remove it
Right.
from to remove config from an actual file. It's easier that way. And you'll see that there are two scripts or two types of scripts. There's the standard sh, where they're called .sh, which is for bash, and then the csh for the C shell. So you have to really accommodate both.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think it's just a I never really use C shell. I think they're more or less equivalent. Well, they're not, but in terms of doing something simple that you want to do, it should be pretty straightforward, I think. Oh, I see. Yeah. So, for example, with CSH, you use setenv, and then with Bash, you use export.
Okay.
Other than that, yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way of doing it. It's the easiest way of managing it. Hmm.
I'm just having a look at these script files now in the profile.d directory.
Yeah. You may even not actually want to make it a .new config, so that because if you only really want to make something .new, if you think that the user will modify that, and customize it so that when they upgrade to your latest package, you don't wipe out all of their customizations and annoy the
Right.
user. But
Right.
sometimes I don't do that because the user really shouldn't be fiddling with it. If it's something that's hard coded and quite frankly isn't going to, if you can't add in extra config in there, and in your package has only been tested or only works with, in your case, the data file that
Yeah.
you need to reference, probably just leave it as it is.
Mhm.
Just leave it. In other words, just don't call it .new. Just call it whatever it is, Vulkan 3D graphics driver.sh or CSH, and just put it in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I would do to begin with. Put in the config file that this package belongs to your Vulkan package, and that when you upgrade that Vulkan package, it will wipe out any user customizations, so that people don't get caught by surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly a consideration for when you're installing it, because obviously it's going to make fundamental changes to the Xconfig.
Well, it's not, is it? Unless you're
Yeah.
shipping an Xconfig.
Yours is set up with FB Turbo, and I need to get rid of that in order for this to work. So it needs to be understood that what's required before it's installed.
Right, but I wouldn't put that into a package though. Don't put any
Mm,
of that logic into a package. Because you said that this Vulkan package is something that you're sort of experimenting with. So
yeah.
I would make it clear how you install the package. One of the steps is to move the default xorg.conf out of the way.
Hmm.
Just delete it or rename it. That's
Yeah.
what I would do, and just do it manually.
Yeah. That's what I did. I renamed
Mm,
it to xorg.back,
right.
just for the purpose of testing. But I've got several tests now between the Raspbian OS and Slackware. And there's several rendering modes that actually work under Raspbian that work in after a fashion under Slackware. So I must be missing some libraries or something. That's what I'm checking into now.
Okay.
Hmm.
Don't put into scripts in packages things that start moving things around on the file system that people aren't expecting. It's just not good practice.
Right.
If you're going to do something that it's one thing if I do it because I kind of maintain the entire distribution, so I know what I'm supporting. But on the other hand, where you're supplementing something else, I wouldn't expect people to start supplying packages that change what the default settings are unless it's explicitly called out that this is what's going to happen, or you document manually the steps. But you've only got one step. It's move a file out of the way. So it's not, it's not difficult.
Move a file out of the way and set a variable.
Mm-hmm.
So
in the future, it is possible. Is this only on? You're talking about the Raspberry Pi 4. Is that what you're working on? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so if this Vulkan package takes off in the future, I can easily change the X11 scale package that owns the xorg.conf package so that it can provide two different configs. So it picks one or the other. It's not difficult to do. In fact, I used to do that anyway in the old days when I had to have different Xorg configs for different physical ARM systems that I had. And all it really did was it just made a symlink from one to the other.
Right.
That was it. I think that was all it did. So it's easy to do that. But to begin with, just make it manual. It's easier. Well, better for visibility.
Okay, well, that's really great. Thanks for clearing that one up.
Awesome, cool, man. Well, listen, I've got to go. So it's really good to talk to you on this one. We'll pick up the other subjects in the next episode.
Okay.
All right, cheers, Phil. Have a good one. Speak to you later.
See you later. Bye for now.